Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to another highly anticipated update for the continuation of these altcoin videos. Arguably one of the more important altcoin updates that leads the markets basically, or at least has done so in the past, which is Ethereum. We got a ton of things to discuss here, more so on the macro side of things to kind of get a rough gauge of where we stand. I think it's a good time to really discuss where we are using the Elliott Wave Theory, which helps filter out the emotional garbage basically. And that leads us to the question, are we still in a bullish or bearish count? That's what we're going to discuss in this video, as neutral as possible when it comes to bias. And that being said, if you are interested in seeing more of these altcoin video updates, please make sure to show your interest by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much. And also a quick shout out to my partner in crime, XForceGlobal. So starting off, Ethereum quite arguably has one of the trickiest ways of counting the current bull market without being too creative. The previous run-up from its inception is more or less established and objectively clear in my opinion, so no need to adjust that. It's just the current range because I think this year a lot of Ethereum traders had it the roughest when it comes to the actual gains, the potential gains even, for how everything else was running, and Ethereum was just kind of going back and forth along the way. So it was really rough for them. It really has been a roller coaster, but it did eventually catch up and hit new all-time highs, and that's a very important objective marker. But when we zoom out and try to gain perspective on how we can connect all of the previous waves, there are only really two ways to see the current range in my opinion. And I still think that we have more bullish options left on the table when we're taking the context of every single asset, including Bitcoin, the Bitcoin dominance, and everything so forth. I really do think that even with the most conservative approach, I do still think there is a chance and at least has some juice left in the tank. I think we may be working in what is known to be a larger cycle, expanded flat pattern. And for those that don't know, the expanded flat pattern is basically where we create a larger distribution range, and it reflects a very specific psychological dynamic within the markets where you have a strong equilibrium between 3 points of contact labeled as an A, B, and a C wave. And the beginning wave A, when you're in a bull market, that is basically the counter trend that creates the first signs of doubt. That's usually kind of retracing the extreme paramount moves that we had on the way up. And it happened, right? Basically, that massive bear market that we had back in 2021 into 2022, that was basically the wave A. And then you have that wave B to the upside. And that is basically the entire bull run that we had for this cycle. And it usually exceeds the start of the wave A, and that's known as the expanded flat. There are different variations of the flat. You can retrace above the origin of wave A, and that's what creates this B wave. And there is a flat pattern known as that, which is the expanded flat, which we're currently in. It's not really aggressive buying or selling. It's just the early signs of fatigue on the way up. And it's also corrective structure in itself. And then we have the C wave where it reverses the entirety of the wave A, and it's often sharp, just like how that wave A happened, and it reverses the entirety of that. And this usually happens because momentum traders jump back in on the top of wave B, creating late buyers, and the smart money uses this liquidity advantage to jump the bandwagon essentially as exit liquidity, so they leave the markets basically at that wave B point. But if we're able to identify the entirety of the pattern using the sequential ABC pattern here, there's a very good chance that you can use the final panic selling moment when you finish up this wave C, because the same thing that happened at the top of wave B will also technically, or theoretically that is, will also happen at the bottom of wave C. And this is what creates that expansion beyond both sides. And I think that's what we're creating here. We do have all the necessary distribution characteristics, basically meaning, going back that wave A. This wave B is taking quite long in time, but it's not really uncommon. I would say it's just part of the theory that it's better to kind of just do it now, which is the bearish scenario. But I do think that with the context of how Bitcoin is playing out and that there's still some juice left in the tank for Bitcoin, there's still some chance for Ethereum to also continue its run to the upside. And this is why that first scenario where we have the first component and we're now kind of finishing up that second component, I don't think Ethereum is going to be running as strong as many other altcoins, but I do think that it will mark one of those points within this entire cycle that it's still within the game against every meme coin there is, all the shit coins basically that have died out. I do think that Ethereum will mark its territory, will make another high. And I think that's going to be in the range between the 123.6 and the 138.2%, which is very, very pretty much a spot on target when you look at the psychological 5-digit even $10,000 level. That's where the 138.2% lies when you're trying to take it from the pivot of wave A to the termination of wave A, and that gives you the target of this entire structure here, basically the flat, kind of where that flat zone is. It's known as the B pocket expanded zone. So if we do get a rejection there, or assumption, we should get a rejection, and that should be the bear market in itself. And that aligns with the timing of this 2026 quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 run that we're expecting for a lot of other altcoins. There's just so many better other altcoins that show a better setup, but I would say Ethereum down the road will portray maybe the best opportunity and the strongest bull run when you're taking it the consideration of the future retracement. When it finishes its retracement, I think that this will now flip the tables even against XRP, becoming the most profitable coin down the road, in my opinion. I think just because of this large distribution, people buying up so much Ethereum on the way, I do think that it will mark that territory here and then mark its territory over here as well. And that's what creates that larger expanded flat that I just mentioned. In theory, it is a distribution tactic, and that's very, very prevalent on what's happening here, especially with the current bull market where everything is just kind of overlapping with each other, not really resemblance of an impulse structure of a 5-wave move to the upside. So this is good news on the extreme macro side. This is why we have this labeled as a cycle. And that is a good news and kind of bad news, I guess. But it's just really how you want to see it. I think I call it opportunity, in my opinion, especially if it does come down to these levels back to the 3 digits of the $500, $700 regions that can technically complete off this entire target of how an expanded flat is going to be playing out. But in that regard, that is one scenario. I would say this is the most kind of logical approach, but we do have another scenario where I think a lot of people are trying to count a 5-wave move into this move, and I can count a 5-wave move into it, which is this, into a wave 1, and this would be labeled as a WXY instead, and that would be the marking of an intermediate to conclusion. And this entire move up here as a 5-wave move would be a wave 1 instead of a wave A that we have for that flat idea. Then we have a wave 2 conclusion here. We do have pretty much using the pivot of this point here and this here, this entire range. It did retrace down to the 61.8%, which is another golden Fibonacci, which is why we're also observing a small bounce. So if we do, in case, blast through for whatever reason the crypto markets have become incredibly bullish, I don't think that this is the more logical count. As much as I want it to happen, I don't think it's going to happen. Just going to astronomical levels at $158,000-$80,000 per Ethereum, it just doesn't make sense to me. Even within this current cycle, it'd be a long drawn out extended for another 4-year cycle essentially for Ethereum. It does have a good look to it when you're using the separation of everything, the internal wave counts. We do have a clean 5-wave structure here, arguably, instead of saying that this is a wave 3, 4, 5 that completed off this being a larger wave 1, and then we're working in a 2. Instead, we're just nesting the structures is what I like to call it. We have a 1, 2 here, a 1, 2, a 1, 2, and then another 1, 2. This would be extremely bullish. If this happens, fantastic. I would basically be missing out on everything. But it is possible. It is a scenario. And I think a lot of people are also seeing the shorter time frames this way, but the only way we can fit it into the context of the larger time frames is by building the higher degrees, and the lower degrees as such is how it's playing out. When it comes to the actual timing of each degree, this larger one, smaller, and even smaller here, it is playing out quite nicely in that regard when it comes to the timing perspective. It just really needs this strong execution. But I don't see that happening, especially with Bitcoin. I do see an eventual end happening. for this cycle, around $150,000 to $300,000 per Bitcoin. And because of that, I do think that it just doesn't make sense for Ethereum to just go on a massive run. It can. Maybe there is always a room for a first, but I just don't see that happening. So that's that. I would label this as an alternative scenario and keep it as an alternative for now. So this would be the primary idea going forward. However, we do have a possibility, as with Bitcoin, going into a bear market. And now, the reason why I don't like to say Bitcoin is going to be going into a bear market is the sole reason behind is because of Ethereum alone. And this is where a lot of people have some troubles when it comes to the actual organizational skills, using the fundamentals of everything and tying in each of the assets to make a coherent thesis. And I think this is where a lot of people fall short. A lot of people think, with this happening, we need essentially the biggest bear run to follow through. I just don't see an 80% move from these levels alone to happen right away. Now, there is a possibility that this is the complete flat. Since we did create a technical high here, instead of me labeling it for one more move to the upside, as we did here, the flat is now essentially technically complete at these levels over here. So that's why it is very possible, but very unlikely that we're going to be going for an 80% move, just based on the fact that there is some room for Bitcoin and XRP. It just doesn't make sense that Ethereum would be leading the markets entirely for all and be all. It just doesn't make sense in my opinion. And because of that, you're now essentially going to have to count this as a five-way move happening, and you're betting on the markets that another 80% move on Ethereum is going to be happening. And we saw that already. It took quite a bit of time here to just move to these levels over here, but we breached that level again. And because of that, it just doesn't make sense that we're going to be doing another 80% move at these levels alone. Again, but it is a possibility. So this is more on the lower spectrum of the probability, but it is a probability. So just keep that in mind. And we can revisit this if we do start to see some red flags. And I'd be more than happy to swap to a bearish thesis, but it just doesn't make sense at this point for me to say that we're going straight into a bear market, just using the context of everything else. The Bitcoin dominance, for example, is showing some lower levels. I'm probably going to do a separate video on just the Bitcoin dominance alone. So if you're interested in seeing that, hit the like button, ladies and gentlemen, subscribe to the channel and show me your interest. I would be more than happy to show that on why and expand on the theory and the thesis on why we're still looking for a higher level, just using the context of every other asset class. So that's that, and I think that that's really the only way we can look at it, ladies and gentlemen. I really can see just a flat idea being played out here, or a bearish idea that just happens now, but you're betting essentially in filtering out every single bullish idea and just emotionally attached to a bearish thesis that this is pretty much the only time we can do it. This would be your scenario here, but it's the lower probability. But other than that, the alternative idea is still far stretched in that regard as well. So we're sticking it to a more neutral bias approach. Conservative targets is what I like to play with. The $10,000 mark to the $7,000 range just makes more sense in my opinion. But from a risk-reward management perspective, I just feel like Ethereum is going to be one of those type of coins for the cycle where a lot of these higher distribution, there's far better distribution strategies and pattern recognitions that we see for other altcoins, like I show for XRP. So far, that XRP thesis has been playing out for the past 2 years, essentially, for that larger triangle breakout ever since. And Ethereum is in that same boat as well. I just don't find it as interesting to, when you're looking at it from a risk reward perspective. But that doesn't go to say it's very important for the altcoin markets, because it does give us the sense of strength when it comes to the overall psychology of the markets. So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you very much. I hope if you are interested in the Discord membership, I do have a running Black Friday discount sale. If you're interested in that, please don't hesitate to reach out using any of the links in the description below. Massive sale going on right now. The sale ends very soon. But if you're interested in just more of the entry level point of seeing what kind of content I provide, the Patreon is also for you. Link is also in the description below. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a fantastic rest of the week. Bye-bye.